Greetings, folks. How you doing? It's Joe Driscoll back with Salt City Grind, podcast exploring all the issues here in the 315 in the Syracuse area. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the podcast, you can go to the website, saltcitygrind.com. We're available on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and, of course, here on Facebook. Today, I'm joined by my friend and colleague. He's prized to be called the Honorable Ronnie White Jr., but he was it is a fun feeling, right? I remember the first time I saw Honorable in front of my name, and I was a little bit excited, confused, a lot of emotions. But
yeah, it definitely took me back a little bit. It's one of those things that you work for. You're putting your best foot forward to try and achieve these things and these titles, and then one day you've got it, and there's that Honorable in front of your name, and you're just like, oh wow, that's me.
I know my teachers in high school never thought the word honorable would be in front of my name. I'm pretty positive of that.
Yeah, who are you telling, man? And who are you telling? People are be
So, I had a couple of meetings. TNT, I think I messaged you. TNT Eastside wanted to get to know you, and for folks that are engaged in the political system that haven't gotten across your path yet, why don't you just give folks a little background, where you're from, some trajectory of how you, how you ended up in Syracuse and some of those stories about, your origin story and where you come from.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So I originally grew up well, it's not a really small suburb. It's actually quite a large suburb, but a suburb of Chicago called Oak Park, Illinois. I lived there from when I was about 3 till I was right around 15 or so. Originally from a single family household, or single parent household, I guess I should say. Mom and dad split up when I was quite young, and that's kind of what took us out into the Oak Park area. Went to school there for a little while, wasn't doing so hot socially. And my mom had an opportunity to move down to the Atlanta area. So she took it. So that led me down to live in Atlanta. And I lived in Atlanta from when I was about 15, right up until I came here for law school. So, when I was down south, very active in sports. Right, I was like a wrestler, varsity wrestler. Went to nationals a couple times. A lot of people don't really know that. It was fun. That was really kind of my thing there. But I guess in some ways, being that caliber of an athlete kind of went to my head a little bit, and I continued to really always make the right decisions, and I ended up getting in some trouble my senior year, which led to me getting expelled from all sports, interestingly enough, right? So I was in the orchestra, I was, a varsity wrestler, I was on the debate team, and the trouble I ended up getting into ended up barring me participating in both wrestling and also the debate team, which is really kind of crazy, because if you got a kid that's, kind of struggling a little bit, right, with some issues, well, you can take away the one academic thing that is positive for them, but it happened, right?
Right.
But after that, I really kind of sucked out my motivation to really participate in school and things like that. So I due to my transferring from Illinois down to Georgia. It really kind of messed up my credits. I wasn't a bad student, not necessarily motivated, but I wasn't bad by any means. But due to transferring and then transferring schools, once I was in Georgia, I had enough credits to be on grade level, but I wasn't able to graduate on time. I came back for my 5th senior year, but in another round of great decisions that I made, I had decided, to move out from my mom's house in between during that summer and move in with some friends of mine. And, because the school considered me emancipated, I could pretty much do whatever I want. So I was writing notes, I was writing myself sick notes, all none of my friends were, in school at the time, right, where they graduated. I think, and only like one or two of us at the time were actually going to college, like, we were supposed to or whatever. So I just didn't have it in me. And one day I was late to school, and, I got there, and I think I was actually in home ec class of all things. And my teacher was, asking me, hey, Ronnie, you were late. Do you have a parent's note? And I was like, I got your parent's note, and pulled out my notepad and and I'm sitting there writing my note, and I was just like, I don't have to do this, right? Why am I doing this, right? I'm not going to go to school for another year, to get my college prep degree, as they called it, so I could go on and go to college. And I was, studying for this vocational degree, and I was like, well, what's a vocational degree going to get me? I don't need this. So that exact same day, I marched myself down to the administrative office and checked myself out of school for forever. Terrible decision, right? Like, it's one of those things, like, going back on it, like, why would you ever do that, right? Stick it out, right, kid, right? Like, hey, right, why'd you leave your mom's house, right? You got it made, right? Like, she's paying for everything, right? Like, I had a car, right? All my food and stuff taken care of. But I thought I knew it all.
As you do, I think that comes with that age. I think we're right when you're 18, 19, you're pretty. My friend Colin always used to say you should write a book now before while you still have everything figured out. Before you grow up. Yeah, you have every answer. Write it down now, because you get certainly confused in a year or two.
Yeah, no, definitely. So from there, I started getting a lot into music at that point in time. So I spent the last of the that's actually a funny thing about it. Spent the last of my college fund on 2 turntables and a mixer.
There you go.
Right, and I taught myself how to DJ. Right, so and then I spent the next several years kind of playing raves and clubs as a DJ, and was kind of using that to get by. When I eventually kind of figured out that if you're going to follow that lifestyle, and especially the club lifestyle, it's really one that lends itself to you being out 5-6 days a week, right? For that politics game, right? You got to stay in front of the club promoters,
right?
Things like that, and it just got really old, after a while, and a couple of close calls there, where I could have ended up incarcerated. And didn't, and I really kind of decided at that point that I should, kind of turn things around. And at that point, I decided to get my GED.
Yeah. So how did it go? I mean, it seems like a sharp turn going from that musical life, late nights, DJing at the clubs till the wee hours, as I know those gigs go, to ending up at Syracuse Law School. What was it that kind of turned the boat for you and made you, go from point A to point B there?
Well, I mean, like I was just kind of describing, it was really the desire that I have to do something, right? I can't, all throughout. So yeah, I was, DJing and stuff, but I was also picking up odd jobs, I think one summer, a buddy and I, we washed trucks, like, those, I don't know, I can't think of it, like, delivery truck type trucks, right? Like almost like U-Haul type trucks. We did that for a little while, right? Waited tables, was bussing, doing all this stuff. And, I got to a point where I was working worked my way up in that world to where I was working fine dining. And, the restaurant I was working at the time was actually an Emerald's restaurant, believe it or not, down in Atlanta. We serviced a high clientele, right? And, I'm sitting there and I'm just like, what's the difference between these people and me, right? I can speak just as well as them. I walk by, I hear, and I can understand the conversation that they're having. Why can't I do that, right? And so at that point, I really decided that, I need to go back, not just to any kind of school, but I need to go back to a 4-year university, which ended up being quite a struggle, because in Georgia, you're not allowed, if you have a GED, to go straight to a 4-year university. You got to go to a 2-year first. And transfer in, which is crazy because, I think I scored like a 1220 on the SATs, right? I think I had a 2.8 coming out of high school, right? So I definitely would have gotten in somewhere had I stuck through it.
Right.
But because I, again, knew it all, I had to do things the hard way.
And so which university did you go to first? And then how did at what point did you decide that law, you wanted to take education that step further and go for the law degree?
Well, I ended up going to DeVry University first. It had become a university at that point. And that really came about because I ended up back at my mom's house, and she was basically like, either you're going to join the military or you're going back to school. And that, for me, was a pretty easy choice, right? So, and again, I didn't know what to do, and I had a mild interest, or a pretty large interest at the time, in computers. So it seemed like a natural fit. But once I got to DeVry, I quickly realized that program wasn't what it was advertised to be. It wasn't quite for me, and I started working to make sure I took enough credits so that then I could transfer to Georgia State University, where I ended up going.
Nice.
There were some like discrepancies with my application, so it ended up actually taking me a couple years to get into Georgia State. But once I did, then I went straight for 5 years, and then ended up at Syracuse. And I guess I would say what led me to decide to pursue the law is that I just wanted more. Right, I got really engrossed into my program. I was a history major. I really loved the reading. I really loved the writing. And you me, so I also like the occasional argument, even though it's not necessarily like a great skill for an attorney. You could be an attorney if you don't like to argue, but at the time that's all I knew. And I wanted more for myself, and so then I decided to double major in political science. So I could, really kind of learn, what the system was, what the system was all about. And then from there, it was, on and popping.
Yep. So take us from there. So how, when did you decide that you wanted to be involved in politics? We brought you on here because you're the most recent addition to the Syracuse Common Councilor, or you're the counselor at large representing the whole city. For those who are unfamiliar, the council system works that there are district representatives, and then they're at large. So you'll represent the whole city with this appointment. What made you, want to get involved in politics, throw your hat in the ring for council, and what skill sets do you think you'll will make you valuable when you go on to the council as you've started here?
Sure. Well, I mean, I guess I'd say, even back in high school, one of the only areas in which I excelled was the social sciences. And, I was lucky enough to get recommended into an honors government class. And, once I did that, I was hooked. Right. So, all the way back then, I've always kind of considered myself a bit of a political junkie. Right. So I've always, followed very closely, at least the national news at that point. Right. What's going on with the presidential races, what's going on in the Senate and the House. Right. And I was just very, very, very focused on those things. But once I got to law school, well, actually, I mean, and the whole point of me going to law school in my mind originally was that I wanted to work in Congress. Right. I wanted to be a legislative aide or on a congressman's staff. Right. Helping to write legislation, helping to get it passed. Right. That was really kind of my main goal. But I took a little detour because in law school, I had the opportunity to do an internship with the New York State Attorney General's office. And, coming from my background where there were no attorneys that I was ever really exposed to, except for at those lunches at Emerald's, right? I really had no idea what an attorney, does day to day. And in doing that, doing this internship, I learned that I liked the actual practice of law, right? I liked the idea of writing a motion to, help whatever person out of their particular problem, right? I liked the idea of, thinking about how do I use this established body of law to achieve my goals, or how do I advocate for a change in the law, right? So that's what kind of got me into being a trial attorney. But once I got out of law school, and I had a lot more time to think about things, I realized again I wanted more, and I wanted to be not just connected to the community, but I wanted to do what I could, right, to make sure that the interests of the community that I lived in was really being advanced, right? So, interesting aside, while I was in law school, I lived on the near west side, right, Onondaga and Slocum. And I don't know if many people know. I mean, hoping Syracuse area, but that's not necessarily the best area, right? Yeah. And I would walk from Onondaga and Slocum, through and past the bricks, up the hill, back down every single day. And it just was it was shocking to me just how different it was once you got underneath that viaduct and up that hill, right? Yeah. And you come, you do that every day for 3 years, and it's hard not to just think about how differently the people there are treated, and wondering who is advocating on their behalf, right? So I really just kind of decided at that point, I'm going to do something about this when I can, right? And so I slowly started to get involved, kind of nibbled around the edges there. Got again, not being from here, it can be a hard community to crack, so to speak, yes. Right? If you don't really know where to start, it's not very opaque here. But on good recommendation of the now Judge Cuffey, who was my boss at the time at the county attorney's office, I said to him, Gordon, I really want to get involved. I think I can help, and what can I do? And he said, well, I'm not really sure, but I think you should start here. And what he handed me was a flyer for the Political Leadership Institute.
Nice.
Right? Yeah, and that's how I got involved with PLI. And I took that class, and it really gave me an understanding of what actually goes on in any sort of local political campaign, but also especially what goes on here in New York, right? Because I think New York's a lot different than a lot of different other places, and it also put me in touch with a number of other people who were then able to help me expand my network to be able to get more involved, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to PLI. I took the PLI course as well, and found it super instructive and super helpful. Yeah, definitely.
Yep. So from there, it was really just a matter of what's next, right? So I joined the committee. Looking to figure out again how do I get more involved, right? Because PLI isn't a instruction booklet on how to do things, right? It's you still need some guidance and assistance from there, right? So I joined the committee, and then I was browsing Facebook one day, and my now good friend Mike Green posted that he was looking for a campaign manager. And I decided to, take that on and to help him, get elected. And from then on, I've just been very deeply connected to Democratic politics here in the city. Yeah,
absolutely. So tell us a little bit, like when you talk about, what a lawyer does day to day, what particular, for those folks who are unfamiliar, what particular type of law did you practice, and what does a typical day, a typical week look like?
Well, I've always considered myself a trial attorney, right? And I guess the difference being, there's kind of trial attorneys and there's kind of transactional attorneys, right? That's like the broadest dichotomy that you can draw with those. And a trial attorney is somebody that it may not always necessarily end up in court, but it is somebody that's a court-based attorney, right? They go to court, right? They're there to advocate really on their client's behalf. Whereas a transactional attorney is more drafting documents, right? Wills, trusts, contracts, leases. I currently do a little bit of both now. I have my own little general practice, but my main focus is on court-based work.
So when When you go to trial, what would be the typical type of cases you'd be, what would your clients be in the courtroom for generally?
Well, so initially, my initial trial-based work was really started when I worked for the county, right? I used to represent child protective services and abuse and neglect cases. So our focus there was on protecting the children, right, and figuring out were the children harmed in some cognizable way, right, and then B, what services could the court order in order to assist the family to better able to protect their children. So I did a lot of that, but eventually I started taking on some more, I wouldn't say tougher, but cases in which the county was getting sued, right? So that was ending up in front of a jury, right? So those family court cases usually are just in front of a judge. They're not super public, it's very much smaller courtroom. But then I kind of took on, bigger cases in which the county was getting sued, which necessitated me getting in front of the jury and learning how to, talk and do things there. And I gotta say, man, if you're an attorney, right, especially a trial attorney, there is no greater feeling than arguing a case in front of a jury, right? There's something about, being able to connect with these people and, getting your point across, while you've got somebody else presenting their side, right? It's very, competitive and, and head on. But, I think most of my day these days really consists of client contact, right? So, making phone calls with my clients, emails, text messaging them, and then appearing in court almost daily to try and, move their case along and get a resolution that actually does not involve a trial, right? That's one thing that's very different from my practice now is that, my goal is to try and get everything resolved. And I think usually you want things resolved before trial, but given that I do a lot of criminal defense now, I really try not to let clients get in front of a jury or even in front of a judge, on a bench trial, because they're just unpredictable and you never know, what exactly is going to happen.
If the compromise can be reached by other means, that's preferable and ideal.
Certainly.
So we just had a couple of questions that people have posted online. One is that who is the council going to use for legal advice now? So maybe we can talk on that. And then the other question was, are you still working as an attorney? So to clarify, Ronnie still is practicing law and doing his thing regularly. Counsel, for those who are unfamiliar, is meant to be a part-time gig, but for anyone who signs up for it, you're pretty much signing up for 2 full-time jobs, one of them paying less than whatever your other full-time job is. But it's a fun gig. We love it. So we could, maybe touch on the fact that, you were for a brief time there, the council passed legislation to get its own legal representation for those circumstances. For those who are unfamiliar with how the system works, traditionally the councilors go to the corporation council, the city's law team, the mayor's law team, to work with them on legislation and concepts. But should there arise situations where corporation council and the common council disagree, we felt it necessary to have our own legal representation. And for the brief amount of time you were on, you helped draft the right to know legislation, which was a big issue here in the city of Syracuse. So maybe if you wanted to touch on your time as the council's representative and how that went, and your feelings about right to know.
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is that was extremely important legislation, right?
Yeah. Maybe for those who don't know it, maybe you could go into like some of the things that it clarified and why right to know is important.
Yes. So, one of the main tenets, I think that, it's really, because I'm going to do a high level summary here without pulling up my notes here, is that it really kind of, speaks to the interaction of police officers with their citizens, right? And what it speaks to is that you have a right to know, right? Like kind of like the title says, to know who is stopping you, why they are stopping you, and what your possible recourse might be should you not be comfortable with what happened during your stops, right? It also speaks to making sure that there is informed consent for any searches that might happen. And then the later half of the legislation is really aimed at, helping the council to provide oversight to understand who's being stopped and why.
Right. Yeah, it was definitely a long fought battle, and I'm really proud of the work we did collaboratively on that. So maybe tell us a little bit about the campaigns you worked on. Didn't you work on Judge Bogan's campaign a bit as well?
I did. Yeah, I worked on Judge Bogan's campaign to help her get reelected to her city court seat. I also worked on Judge Karounas's campaign. Maybe not too popular with some of my Democratic colleagues, but I have a lot of love for that woman in my heart. I worked for her when I was in law school, and while I was in law school, I didn't really go back home very much, and she was extremely kind to me, and opened up her home to me. And allowed me to come over, for I think Thanksgiving was maybe the first time,
Nice.
And we kind of made it a habit of doing holidays, with her, and after that, and I think my mom and my grandmother, before my grandmother passed, they at my law school graduation they actually stayed at her house, right? So when she came, asking me, for help for a campaign, of course, right? Like, you got it.
Yeah,
I worked on her campaign, and then I worked on Judge Bogan's campaign, and then I got involved helping Councilor Green with his two campaigns.
So what are some of the things that resonate with you most about those campaigns? Some things maybe you've taken in about Syracuse politics, or about the lessons learned from being engaged in those campaigns?
Well, what I would say is that campaigning is harder than anybody could possibly imagine, right? It really seems like it's an easy endeavor. Okay, yeah, you just run. Man, it's not. It's really not that easy. Anywhere from talking about raising the money, right? Because I've helped plan and throw events, right? I have passed out literature. I've kind of plotted where people need to go. But I guess one thing I would really say is that, because at least pre-COVID, you got a lot of contact with voters. And, I would say that, as difficult as it can be in partisan times, that people are fundamentally decent, right? And I helped Judge Karounas, so I knocked on a lot of doors with people that I did not agree with.
Right.
And people are fundamentally decent, and I really hope at some point we can kind of get back to that decency and kind of take some of the rancor out of politics, because it especially on this local level, because it's not about, right, the usual partisan bickering, right? We're talking about what can we do for where we live, right? How do we advance our community, right? And you really get a sense that it is our community when you're out there knocking doors.
Yep, absolutely. I love it. So, speaking of the counselor there who became your friend and whose campaign you're in, he just announced yesterday that he plans to throw his hat in the ring for the mayor's race. You'll definitely have your own race to run. You'll be running in this next cycle as well. Any thoughts about Councilor Green's mayoral run? You plan on working on his campaign at all, or will you think you'd be too focused on? I think your race is going to be competitive as well. So, I mean, just I think a lot of people are. It seems like a lot of, for some reason, I think it's the Trump effect has taken like 2 or 3 years to really settle in. Like, it just seems like this cycle. It's like I'm just getting emails from people all the time, like, I want to run for office. Like, wow, cool, man. Everybody's ready to go, man.
I would say that the more the merrier, right? Democracy is messy, but I think the more choices that people have, right? I definitely don't think that that's a bad thing. But I will certainly be focusing on my own race, right? I wish Councilor Green, he's a good friend of mine. I wish him a ton of luck and success. But I really have to focus on what I'm doing this cycle, which will be new for me, right? Because I'm used to kind of sitting behind the scenes and kind of and planning and strategy and things like that, and not necessarily having to be the person who's having to carry the water and avoid uncomfortable questions, right? When they arise.
Whole different ball of wax, baby, man. This is a different gig, but I'm sure you're gonna take to it like a fish to water. So how about this past election cycle? Anything that's resonating with you from the national scene, or any races across the country? Things that you've taken note of, thoughts about the current state of national politics and how that translates locally.
Ooh, man, that's speaking of tough questions. That's a doozy. I think one thing that I would really say that was interesting to me is that kind of in this the more normal politics before Trump, there really was this this great tension, I think, between the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and the more moderate or centrist wing, and I really see that kind of coming back around again. I think we've kind of gotten over the great menace that is Trump, and I think we'll see a little bit more kind of intra-party stuff. But that kind of leads me to my point, is that one thing that was interesting in the results nationally and kind of across the country in a lot of the House races is that the same playbook, right, did not work everywhere, right? A lot of times I think there's a wish for Democratic politics to be more homogenous, right? For us all to kind of say the same things and toe the party line. But I think whether you want that to be more progressive or you want that to be more moderate, I think the results of this election has shown that what Democrats need, especially in a race such as for the House seat, is a message that is specifically tailored to that district, right? Like, for example, is Onondaga County the best place to run an extremely progressive a message? Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, the election results don't necessarily seem to say that, and that's not to say that I don't believe in progressive policies, but I think there's something to be said that those policies will never get enacted if you don't have somebody that can win and that you can, I don't know, say force, but then get to say, okay, hey, you're in there, let's go, right? Like
that's it to me. I think a lot of it is particularly in delivery and connection with the voters. I think that really that concepts like single payer healthcare or climate change and some of those issues are things that can resonate with voters, and you can win elections with them, or whatever you deem progressive politics. But I think it's in the delivery, and Sam Harris has had a really interesting thing recently about, the appeal of Trump being a complete lack of judgment. Like it feels like, people always feel like those, particularly progressives or whatever, are like, you've got it wrong and I'm judging you. And there's this kind of, and Trump is just like, hey, man, you want to eat a Big Mac, do whatever you want. You want to say this or that, and not to say that that's like, oh, we should take a page out of that book or whatever. But I do think there's something about, to me, I often get like, there's a lot of progressive politicians to me who are like still people that I'd love to, go to a Cuse basketball game with or hang out. And they kind of have that, I'm not to reduce politics to that, you want to have a beer with them thing, but there is to win over the larger public, the group at large. I think people need to feel that you're not looking down and kind of, full of that judgment, so I think it's like, for me right now, progressive politics, I really think it's a matter of kind of translating that to a working class, everyday American kind of, because I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. I don't think you can, I know a lot of people who can walk that line with both of them. They can believe in climate change. They can believe in single payer healthcare and not have that kind of, instilled belief that their way is the only right way,
Sure. And, especially, in today's day and age, right? I think, and that's what I kind of meant by taking the temperature down out of the room, right? Is finding a way to connect with people, because I think that's, again, taking it back to lawyering, right? When I'm across the aisle, from a DA, we have completely different objectives, right?
Right.
Completely different objectives. Their job is to, try and hold my client responsible for something they are alleged to have commit. And my job is to lessen the effect of that and or not have them held accountable at all, right? But we can still meet, in the middle, based on how it is that I am presenting my case to them, right? If am I pounding the table every day in, day out, taking every single argument to the mat every single time, that gets tired, it gets old, and you find that you have less success when you're doing things like that. But on the other hand, if you're willing to listen, right, and I'm by no means am I saying that you got to compromise your values, right? But an open ear, and some understanding really goes a long way a lot of times to showing somebody your humanity and bring them over to your side, right? Like, if you can get people just to understand, like, hey, I am just a person, and this is what I think is best, right? This is what this is what I think is best. What do you think is best? Oh, okay. How can we bridge that gap? Maybe you can't, right? Like, but at least you both left that conversation with your dignity intact, and nobody feels like that they should necessarily be ashamed of themselves. Now let's time out there, right? Because there are certain topics of which if you hold an alternative view from me, then right? Yeah, it is what it is, right? But there are areas in which some of that compromise and understanding can be had.
Yeah. So how are you coping with the COVID situation? What are thoughts about, this COVID world? How are you doing personally, and how do you feel, we're going to be able to, thoughts on people coping, politically and economically, everything that's going on right now?
Well, politically, it's a bit of a nightmare, right? Politics without people and connection is right. I mean, that's essentially what this game is about. Is a connection. Personally, I'm kind of struggling, right? I'm not ashamed to say that.
Yeah.
It's difficult, right? Like, being a solo attorney, right? Having my own, my own law practice. I don't have, people in my office, right? It's literally just me. I don't even have an assistant or a paralegal at this point. So, whether I'm here or I'm in the office, I'm not really connecting with anybody, right? I don't really see anyone. It's really just me. And it used to be the case that, you go to court and, you'd be in the, the waiting rooms, and, you get to, hang out with folks and, chew the fat and, hey, what's going on? Little backslap them. Oh, good to see you, right? All that kind of stuff. And now I just really don't get any of that. And with the, the other social outlets, right? I.e. the bars, being closed down, what do you do? Right. And, it's not necessarily safe to, gather in groups anymore. Right. So, I think, towards the end of, the summer, people really started to, so, okay, well, we can't go to the bar, really. Okay. So let's just all get together. Well, it turns out that's where everybody was getting the virus from. Right. So, like, really now, what do you do? So it's difficult. And some days it's fine. Right. I wake up and I'm like, okay, great, cool, sweet. Other days, I wake up and I just plop down on the couch, and it's extremely hard to do anything, really.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll cut on the TV and doom stare at CNN for a while, but scroll through Facebook a million times. But
you sent me a track the other day. The only way I've been able to stay sane is playing some music, man, hopping on my drum kit and strumming some guitars and some keyboards, and that track was good. Send me some more.
Yeah, I've been working on a few tunes here and there. Trying to get back into it as we speak.
Yeah, some good stuff. So let's do to wrap up. We'll do some fun stuff.
Okay.
Favorite SU sport and favorite athlete. They don't have to be from the same. It doesn't have to be the athlete from the sport you like. But what's your favorite Cuse games to attend, and some of those thoughts.
Well, interesting. So my favorite Cuse games to attend are Syracuse lacrosse games.
Wow.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I go to all. I go to pretty much everything. When we could, football, basketball, lacrosse. I love them all. But I have a strong affinity for lacrosse.
Did you play?
Yeah, I played a little bit, surprisingly enough, and down in Georgia, nonetheless. My little brother is actually he's a lacrosse coach and very into lacrosse himself. But when we were obviously much younger, he was playing at Kennesaw State University on a club team and had played in high school. And he's like, "Yeah, I think you guys have a club team, don't you?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think so." And I was like, "You know what? I'm gonna join the lacrosse team," and joined the team and picked it up. But we always kind of had this connection to Syracuse. And once I started playing, I really just kind of honed in on Syracuse. And so Syracuse lacrosse definitely has a special place in my heart. If I had to say, like, are we saying like favorite SU athlete ever, currently?
How about one of each, ever and in recent years?
Well, ever, it's definitely got to be Jim Brown, right? Like, I don't know how it's not that guy. Football and lacrosse, right? Like, and he's black, right? Come on.
I always think of The Wire, where Omar meets Punk. He's like, "You're the first brother I ever saw with a stick. What's that game?"
Yeah.
Playing lacrosse.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Jim Brown was doing it long before Punk.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, for sure. And then currently, oh man, that one's tough. Right? I don't really know. I would say, I don't know that I have any current favorites per se. I was real high on Eric Dungy when he was here. And clearly we could have used his help this last year. But I also got, some of these freshmen, man, on the basketball team are looking fantastic, right? Oh man, well, yeah, we're looking pretty good. Looking forward to the game tonight.
Fingers crossed, baby. Favorite Syracuse restaurant, favorite Syracuse bar.
Ooh, favorite Syracuse.
You don't have to say necessarily one. You can do one or two if it's a tie or whatever.
Sure. I'd probably say my favorite Syracuse bar is definitely Al's. You can't beat the ambience in there. Obviously, when it was, I kind of liked it better during COVID, right? Because it really wasn't when they were open. It wasn't ever that packed, right? You could actually get a seat in there, right? It was nice and calm. My favorite Syracuse restaurant. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna go with Riley's.
Right? Nice.
Yeah, a little hidden gem up here on the north side, right?
That's your head in the know.
Yeah, and that's certainly not one that I'm going to every day or anything like that. But it's also certainly, when you do go, it's always very, very, very good. And I'd be remiss if I didn't give a quick shout out to Beer Belly Deli over there on Westcott. That's another good one, run by my good friend Lauren Montfort, who's also an attorney. Anybody has the opportunity to order from there, highly recommend it.
Nice. Yeah, great shouts with both of those, man. Riley's was like that was my spot. My dad used to take me, high school or whatever. We used to go, and during the day you could get like a fish and a few veg, just amazing, well cooked, seafood with like great veggies, and the lunch menu was like half the price of the dinner menu, but just equally as delicious. And then the desserts, Riley's is the one, man. I love it. And it always has like a very political vibe to it too, like because there's always political.
Yeah, there's almost always a politician in there for sure.
It's got got that, that big oak wooden vibe, like, just like the big, I love it, man. And then last one, how about, a few favorite albums of all time and a few favorites of recent year.
Oh, come on, Joe. You can't do that. You cannot do that. Okay. So,
give us a cross section of some big ones.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I listen to all kinds of music. And being a DJ and things like that, it's really hard for me to like really like narrow down. But I'm gonna do my best here. And off the cuff, I mean, even though I'm sitting right here, I could pull up my Spotify. I'm gonna try and do it off the cuff. So I gotta say, maybe of all time, Michael Jackson, Off the Wall. I mean, again, I'm just throwing them out there because I don't know if that's actually true, but that's a real good one that comes to mind, right? That's a real good one.
Hit it off the top of the head, whatever comes to mind.
Let's see. Outkast, Aquemini.
I knew that was going to make it. I had a strong suspicion that your ATL was going to come out.
Oh yeah, man, that one's hard. And interestingly enough, I first heard that when I was in Illinois still, and I started rocking that way back then, and then it wasn't until I moved to Atlanta that I actually started to understand what they were talking about. Right? There's a lot of stuff going on that CD that you got to kind of know what's going on. Yeah. Let's see. If we're gonna pick a more like rock type album, maybe a very obscure band, but Cursive. They got an album called Domestica. Fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. Let's leave it at that because I could just go on naming fantastic albums.
Yeah, no, that's a good cross section. I'm glad to hear Aquemini made it. That's definitely one of my top 10 buttes. So, brother, thank you for joining me and chatting it up. Anything you want to say as we wrap up?
Well, actually, I would say, thank you very much, Joe, for having me and giving me this platform to try and let some people know a little bit more about me. I know us politicians and other political figures can be obscure in a lot of people's minds. So it's nice to have this opportunity to talk to people, and especially in a nice conversational style where, I'm not necessarily trying to sell anyone.
Right.
But I will also pivot on that point and state that, I do intend to seek re-election to the seat. So, I will plan on working on that. And if anybody is, interested in learning a little bit more about me, I don't have a website and stuff set up yet, but, reach out to me on Facebook. I'm very, receptive, happy to answer any questions anybody might have. And I look forward to, really doing my best for this city. Whether or not I win re-election or not, I'm there for a year, and I think a lot can be accomplished in a year. I really look forward to, attempting to help strengthen the Common Council, right? Like that's really one of my goals is from an institutional standpoint to make sure that we are not only running the best way that we can be, but that the Common Council has the respect, authority, and kind of gravitas that it deserves, in the local community.
Awesome, man. Great stuff. Well, everybody, Ronnie White, you can check his Facebook page, Ronnie White Jr., Councilor at Large. Thank you for sharing the time with me, brother. Really appreciate it. And I will be seeing you on a Zoom, or as ours is called, WebEx, sometime in the next few days, I'm sure. Oh, actually tomorrow, right?
Yeah, I'll say tomorrow morning, for sure.
Whole bunch of them tomorrow. All right, brother.
All right, thanks for having me, Joe.
Joining me, Ronnie. Take care, bro.
All right, take care.